kindly first of all tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Oscar Guardiola Rivera. I'm a writer. I also teach at Birkbeck College in the University of London, and I'm a keen fan of this festival.
Great. And thank you. Tell us what you're talking about here this weekend.
I'm here to present my book, my latest book. The title of the book is A Story of a Death Foretold. And I'm going to share a couple of events as well.
Well, tell me about the book. I mean, why the title, A Story of a Death Foretold?
Well, the title is contains more than a nod to the Colombian novelist Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who died this year. I must have been 11 years of age when my father gathered us around the radio, because he was going to give his acceptance speech from Stockholm, having received the Nobel Prize for Literature. And in this wonderful speech, he speaks of a Promethean president who died in his besieged palace, burning up in flames, fighting an entire army alone. The phrase got stuck in my mind, and for the most part of my teenage years, I remained convinced that this was some imaginary character. Little I knew that in fact this Promethean president was very real, and his life and death had been crucial to many, not only Latin America but around the world. So I always wanted to tell that story, and the more research I made into the story, the more I became convinced that this was not simply a tale of history or the tale of a lyrical hero. This was a tragedy, proper Greek classical tragedy, but irony of ironies. It happened in the late 20th century, and it happened to Chileans. So I ended up writing the book about the rise and fall of Salvador Allende as if it were a tragedy. And in fact, the second part of the book is called The Flies, because it references the tragedy of Orestes.
Well, talk us through that tragedy, the tragedy of Salvador Allende, if you could just sort of tell us the story.
The best way to begin is with this reference to Prometheus, which Garcia Marquez includes as a bit of a time bomb in his speech. As we all know, Prometheus, the Titan, went off to steal the fire from the hands of the gods in order to give it to mere mortals, and was severely punished for having done so. Allende did pretty much the same. He uncoupled law and politics from the use of force. He stole fire, arms, and the army from the hands of the powerful at the time, which are still the ones we recognize as the powerful, the multinationals, the very powerful families. And for daring to do that, having given power to the mortals, who immediately ran with it and began changing things radically, he was punished. The Furies were unleashed upon him. And I'm not speaking metaphorically, literally. On the 11th of September of 1973, a squadron of fighter jets descended upon his palace and bombarded, reducing it to ashes. And the most beautiful thing in this story, which contains foretellers, it has magicians, it has its heroes, it has women waiting for their heroes to return home. It ends with Allende giving a most wonderful, harrowing speech on the radio to the people outside the palace. We wouldn't know really about what happened to those who remain inside the palace, if not because of the contingent fact that the speech was recorded, the record, the tape was saved, even though the aim of those who wanted him out was to erase every single trace of his existence from history, but his words remained. And many decades later, a younger generation in Chile and elsewhere recovered those words, listening to them on the internet, and they remade the story of their otherwise lost identity. And they're now in the streets of Chile, changing things once more.
So why did you write the book now?
I thought it was, on the one hand, a story about the origin of our times. We live in times in which the powerful have perhaps become even more powerful. The difference between them and the haves and the have-nots is widening up. And it is the case that the kinds of ways in which they defend the position and the world they live in, the narrative of the world we live in, which we call economics, the new religion, that new theology, that new myth, may have originated on the events of this day, the 11th of September 1973 in Chile. Everybody knows that, for instance, later on, leaders such as Margaret Thatcher are going to be inspired by what had happened in Chile, by General Pinochet, by the way they created a whole new religion and theology around the freedom of markets and so on. These all started in Chile. So, given that we're now living through the biggest crisis of that new religion, it was time to tell the story of that, the emergence of that new religion. That on the one hand. On the other hand, things are on the move once more. Not only in Latin America, but also here in Europe and elsewhere. People are in the streets, the young are taking to the streets, new political parties are emerging for good and bad. And here in Scotland, for instance, we're approaching a decisive moment in which politics, but real politics, not the politics of politicians, matters once more. And it is on those occasions where, as Homer taught us, we must remember the mighty dead, those whose memory, solicits us from the past and allow us to change things and renew the present and the future.